to the Grow RDH podcast. My name is Katie, and I'm a dental hygienist from South Dakota. If you're new listening, welcome. And today we're going to be talking with Joyce Turcotte. She is the president of Professional Learning Services. Professional Learning Services is an educational and consulting service established in 1987. Turcotte conducts dental hygiene refresher programs, computer simulated clinical exam prep, and face-to-face continuing ed courses. She has combined clinical practice and teaching at universities and colleges for decades and is an adjunct faculty member in the periodontics department of the College of Dental Medicine at Nova Southeastern University. She has been an educator and clinician for 35 years, and she is the recipient of the 2014 Phillips and RDH PennWell Mentor of Distinction Award. So we are going to let her just introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her professional journey.
Hi, and thank you very much for inviting me. This is exciting. This is my first podcast, so I appreciate the opportunity. As far as how I got started, I was 16 in high school looking for a part-time job other than babysitting. And I was introduced to a dental office that was looking for dental assistants, and the office trained me, and I immediately loved it. I loved the concepts. I loved working with the patients. I loved helping. I loved mixing cements, developing x-rays, ordering supplies. It was my first real job. And I had these great doctors that were warm, friendly, fatherly. And that was important to me, to be in that kind of environment. And they're the doctors that said to me, you should become a hygienist, which I didn't have any idea what that is, but I looked into it. I grew up in New York City, so I went to New York City Community College, and that was the year of open enrollment. So they took double the amount of students that they could keep. So it became very fiercely competitive. We started out with 90 and 45 graduated.
Oh, wow.
It was shocking. And
Yeah.
It was, I studied all the time, and we had a tiny apartment. So I'd lock myself in the bathroom and study for hours, or the library. And then I went on, when I completed dental hygiene, I went to a couple of offices. Nobody ever told me about how to interview, how to choose a job. So I went through like 3 or 4 offices where just didn't work out. I was very young. I was 20 years old when I graduated. And I was very naive.
Yeah, that is one of the biggest questions that new grads have, right, is how to interview or how to find a good office. But when you graduate, it's like scarcity mindset. You're willing to take anything.
And with the job market the way it is today, you have a lot more opportunity. You can find out about employment easily on Facebook and LinkedIn and other sources. It wasn't like that when I graduated. We didn't understand. We didn't write resumes or anything. So I don't even know how I found out about jobs. Maybe something in the newspaper, probably something simple like that. Mm-hmm. And I would go for the interview. That was it. I was hired or I wasn't hired. And I got hired. I interviewed well, but I didn't last. 6 months, and I was unhappy, or they were unhappy with me. And then I began to realize that I'm not happy working for someone else. So I pursued additional education. I got my bachelor's in dental hygiene education at the University of Bridgeport, Bone School of Dental Hygiene. And then I went into a Perio practice as a hygienist, and that I became passionate, absolutely passionate. Really felt that I was making a difference in keeping people's teeth, more so than in a general practice. It was just the experience I had. And the 2 doctors that I worked for at the time were both teaching faculty at Yale. So I thought, I'm getting the best on-the-job training, elevation of, my understanding of Perio. They would send us to conferences, and it was just really a great time in the 70s. It was wonderful. And that's what drew me to Perio. I mean, my early experiences with these doctors. And, but over time, moved on, got married, different things happened. And I started when I finished my bachelor's, I got my first teaching position at Fairleigh Dickinson University. Very part-time. That's in Hackensack, New Jersey. And I commuted from Connecticut to New Jersey because I was that eager to teach. And then I discovered I really love teaching. I think I always loved teaching. I remember being a little girl setting up all my dolls on the couch, and I would teach them. So teaching was always a passion of mine. And I also was I am a very independent person, except when it comes to technology. I'm working on that. But as far as being willing to take chances and not being afraid to try new things, and you learn from mistakes. And I made mistakes along the way, and I never made the same mistake twice. So I went on to teach part-time, and then I was offered a clinic coordinator's position at Community College of Philadelphia. And I taught there for 2 years, graduating 2 classes, a career ladder curriculum, nothing to compare it with. So I'm 23 years old, 24 years old, clinic coordinator of a first and second year class with no syllabi. They were going through accreditation. So it was literally trial by fire. Yeah. But I loved it.
Accreditation is no joke.
At 23, 24, no one to mentor me. I mean, I did have consultants that helped me. So I shouldn't say I did it all on my own, but I really had to work like 80 hours a week to write the syllabi, the clinic manual, hire the faculty, develop an evaluation system. But that was my foundation. And I look back on that, and that's what's giving me the ability to do what I do today. It's carried me forward. And while I was doing that, I started my master's at Temple University in Philadelphia, and I got my master's in Ed Psych, which really taught me how to work with students. That's carried me through all my decades of teaching. Understanding the needs of a learner, student-centered learning versus teacher-centered learning. And I see you shaking your head. You understand how important it is for the student to be able to be an equal participant I'm a facilitator of learning. Is pretty much my role in this. And thinking back, I started off wanting to be a hygienist to help a patient. Then I continued to be a person that wanted to teach students. Then I advanced in my position when I was hired at the University of Bridgeport, where I was a student, came back to teach in the baccalaureate program. So now I'm teaching teachers or people that want to be teachers to teach students. So I kept advancing in that way. I feel like if I was able to make good teachers, they could make good students who could be then good clinicians. So it was kind of that kind of ladder that I was climbing. And then I got very involved when I started to decide that I wanted to start a family, and teaching full-time was competitive with my personal goals. And I thought I needed to really do my own thing. Although I loved teaching at the University of Bridgeport, it was the right time for me to make a move. So I stayed with teaching, but I went to a different college, Tunx's Community College, which I stayed with for 27 years in Hartford, Connecticut. And I was there part-time. And while I was there part-time teaching, I started professional learning services. So now I'm probably 34 years old married with a 3-year-old and another baby in my belly. And that's how I started PLS, Professional Learning Services.
A 3-year-old
While
and
I'm
one on the
doing,
way. That's a lot.
that's what the business advisor said to me. And I
Yeah.
said, I could do it if you want to help me, if you want to help me guide me how to start my own business. So I went to the Small Business Administration in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and they were free and helpful and gave me so much guidance. And they were actually so impressed that I had thrived for decades because so many small businesses fail. And I don't really I understand that failing happens, but I'm not one to let that happen. I mean, I don't know how to
And
explain
in
it, but
your opinion, like what's the difference there? So somebody like is failing just quitting then, or when you had a setback, you just figured out how to move forward?
when I had a setback, I moved forward. My momentum always carried me forward. My mother said to me a long time ago, whatever you do in life, make your own money. Don't rely on anybody else to support you. And that was my driving force. And that was my power of independence. And even though I have a wonderful husband and a wonderful family, and if I stopped working, I wouldn't starve to death. My husband had a very excellent job, but I always wanted to be independent, and making my own money was that means for me.
Yeah,
So
I can echo that in my just in my personal life and my path into how I like went on to pursue my PhD. There was always sort of a catalyst that um, drove me to the next step, and like just being being vulnerable here, it was my divorce, right? I went through a divorce in 2020, right in the during the pandemic, and I was
oh
like,
boy.
I need to have something positive and something, something to focus on, something to put my energy into that was a positive change. And so that's what changed my trajectory. So I think it's important just to, like you said, make your own money, have something to focus on,
Hmm.
and failure isn't quitting. Failure, or making a setback or a mistake, it just teaches you what to do next. It guides you to where you're
It,
going.
it's so true. If you could pause and look at tragedies in your life and disappointments, and what do they say, make lemonade from lemons.
Yeah.
So you remember when I mentioned that I was teaching at Community College of Philadelphia and I was working 80 hours a week? Well, I was married to someone who died in an accident
Oh,
at that time. So I was a widow at 27.
wow.
And I was also enrolled in that master's program at Temple, and I wanted to quit. I wanted to quit everything.
Yeah.
And I had the right professors and the right people in my life that said, don't quit, go on.
Yep.
He would
Just
want you to
funnel that
carry on.
energy.
Yes. And, it made me stronger. It wasn't easy. It
Hmm.
was literally one tiny toe in front of the other. It wasn't even one foot in front of the other. And it was a struggle to keep confidence up on top of everything. But I did it.
Yep.
And looking back, I say, I don't know how I did it, but I did it. And I'm glad I did it. And I want people to know that don't give up. If you give up, you lose. You
One thing I
lose your
thought about when
dream.
you said one tiny toe in front of the other, that's sort of how I felt as I'm finishing my PhD. I just like it's so easy to look at somebody else's journey and be like, they're so far ahead of me, or they're making more progress. And so something like one tiny toe in front of the other, every step of progress is progress. And I think it's, if you don't look in other people's lanes and all you see is your lane, all you're going to see is potential and growth
It's true.
compared to like, oh my goodness, because I was seeing these cohorts of people that started when I did and they're graduating and I'm like, okay, but I also have 3 kids. I work full time. Like it's
Yeah,
progress.
it's true, and you can't compare your path to others, um, because we all have different circumstances we're confronting at one point. Raising a family, it could be, fortunately, we haven't had any unhealthy situations that would really, but a lot of times people do, and they have to take a break and they can't keep up the pace they had. But it's just, to me, it's a temporary pause. You just keep going forward. So I started professional learning services because I wanted to be available to my children. And I know teaching full time, I always struggled with daycare and all that. So working from home was very helpful. And then 2 days a week, I would go out to the school and teach at Tungus Community College. And it just evolved. I mean, I started off with just a few seminars, just seeing how I wrote a brochure. I took it to a graphic design artist and they created the brochure. And then I went to a mail house and they mailed the brochures. And then people started sending me money, and I liked that.
Yeah.
And
Can't argue with that.
it was really nice, when you start to see the results, because there's during R&D, research and development, nothing comes in. It's all work going out. But then there reaches a point, it's almost like cooking a meal. There's all that prep work, and then you sit down to the dinner, and people are happy with the meal that you made. So it's kind of rewarding when people are registering, and then when they actually come to the class and they meet you and they thank you for running this good course and hiring this speaker, and um, and part of the way I got to be known, which I think is important for people to understand, is you have to network, and you have to not only people mentor you, but you have to mentor others. And I was past president of the Connecticut Dental Hygienists Association, but leading up to that, I was an officer in different positions. So you form your, collegial network. And then I was president of the American Academy of Dental Hygiene, which is a national organization. And then I would go to conventions, the ADHA, RDH under one roof is more recent 20 years now compared to ADHA.
Mm-hmm.
And the Greater New York meeting and the Yankee Dental meeting and all the local meetings. So I would go to a lot of different meetings and make it a point to meet people. I'd go to the conventions and I'd make it a point to meet the vendors. And then I would be able to establish relationships so that when I needed things or we wanted to partner on a project, I had contacts. But I had to put myself out there all the time. And it doesn't work with everyone all the time, but if it works with half the people, it could be pretty lucrative.
Yeah. What in terms of, so there's a ton of free CE out there, and I've talked a little bit about it on the podcast before of how sometimes the quality of your CE is way more important than the quantity. And some of these free CEs that they're putting out, these webinars, so many of them are, I don't know, in my opinion, just a little bit diluted. So I'm interested to learn about like what sets professional learning services apart from other continuing ed. I know you have that big refresher course. What else sort of sets you apart?
Well, being in academia and also with having that master's in ed psych, I think that I have a pretty good feel for humans. And I hire people to give presentations. Now, before I used to meet everyone face to face, but now we do a lot of Zoom meetings. I'll read an article. I love the article. I'll contact the speaker, the author, And if I get a good vibe, and I think that after like interview questions about do they have experience doing Zoom meetings and all sorts of stuff, I know content. I know what a hygienist needs to know. And that's what I gear my courses to. I try to also fulfill the needs of some dentists, some of their topics, but primarily professional learning services has focused in on hygienists because the dentists have a lot of programs. And when I started, there wasn't really anything for hygienists. Matter of fact, the law for continuing ed just passed in Connecticut. It passed in 86, and 1987 is when I put out my first brochure. So hygienists were looking for courses. You need to have a market that wants what you have to sell. Did I answer your question?
I think when we were talking and getting ready to record this podcast, you said there has been even some current law changes, like in the state of Florida, that has really made a difference.
Yes. So Florida for some time now has allowed foreign trained dentists to sit for dental hygiene exams, national boards, clinical boards, law exam. And if they pass, they can be licensed as a dental hygienist without ever going to school.
Wow.
Without ever observing a hygienist in practice, because in a lot of countries they don't have hygienists.
Yeah.
So because I have this refresher program, one of my colleagues at St. Petersburg College said, we need to do something about this. And we did some brainstorming, revamped the refresher program that was geared for hygienists who had stepped away from their career, and a lot have stepped away from their career from COVID,
yes.
And now are coming back because their situations have changed and they miss dental hygiene. So I do a refresher program for dental hygienists to help them reinstate a license, or if they had their license, help them get back in so they don't feel so rusty. But I realized that this program that I do in Florida at St. Petersburg College has to be adapted to the foreign trained dentist. It's not apples to apples. These are people that want to pass a board, but they're not really sure they need more than that. I'm like, yeah, you do, because you don't know anything about being a hygienist. It's not a mini dentist. And you don't go to dental school so the law says that you have to take a minimum of 20 hours of remediation. Mm-hmm. If you fail the exam, the boards, the clinical boards, you have to take a minimum of 20 hours of remediation. And our program is 45 hours. And so a couple of the foreign trained dentists will say, I only need 20. And I go, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of explaining I seem to be doing to help them understand. And one of the things I said is, would it take you 20 hours to be a dentist? And they go, no. And I go, see, it's a lot more to it than you realize.
Yeah. Do you think after they take it, like, have you gotten some feedback? They're like, wow, okay, I get it now.
Yes, I have. Because I've had some foreign trained dentists come through the program, in small amounts. Now, the new law, I'm teaching all foreign trained dentists that I can fill in the class. So I'm not mixing and matching. Before it would be, 10 hygienists and 1 or 2 foreign trained dentists in a class, and I taught to the hygienists, and the dentists would be in the class. Now my classes are being filled up with foreign trained dentists, so I'm totally revamped the course so that they can pass the boards, but still know what a hygienist has to do. So we go through all the same things, all the duties, from greeting the patient in the reception area and everything we do in between, so they understand you're not just passing a mannequin exam. You're going to have a license. And I know the thing is, a lot of them, I don't know how many of them, their ultimate goal is to become a dentist in this country. So this is just, for some of them, a stopgap.
Sure. Kind of like a stepping stone. They're going to practice as a hygienist while they get their dental license.
While they're applying, right? But, and it looks good from what I understand. It looks good on their resume that they're a hygienist. But I don't believe they're staying as hygienists. They may stay as a hygienist for up to 5 years. Yeah. So they're kind of, I think of them as just kind of passing through. Mm-hmm. But I want them to provide safe dental hygiene.
Right.
And it's scary to think that they could just. So here's the thing: if they take the exams and they don't fail at all, so the law says if you fail once, you have to be remediated. But what about the foreign trained dentist that gets lucky and passes the clinical boards on the first shot?
Right.
And then they take their national boards and they take their the OSCE exam and then the law exam, and they pass everything. And so there's no remediation. They go right into practice.
And there's no standard then of what they consider like clinical experience or clinical hours or anything that like instrumentation?
It all depends on the interviewer, and who's interviewing them. And now with the shortage, they're just happy to have somebody in the chair, and maybe they give them some tutoring chair side, or, the other hygienists in the office help them out. But is the knowledge base there? No. Is the skill sets there? No. Yeah. So I feel that I'm at least giving them some guidance.
Yeah.
I'd love to make it a longer program, but they're already fussing over 45 hours.
Yeah, right, because 20 is the minimum.
That's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Oh. So let's talk a little bit about relevance and staying up to date. Obviously, we know dental hygiene is constantly changing, constantly evolving. Some of the topics that we've talked about is like implant maintenance. Implant maintenance is like you talk to 20 dentists, you get 20 different, this is what I want. So how do you handle that? What are there certain articles that you really watch, not articles, journals, certain journals that you really keep a beat on? Are there certain technologies that you're getting new articles? How do you stay on top of everything?
Well, certainly I read Dimensions. Mm. And I look at, I go to other CE. I look at what other groups are having for CE, like sleep apnea.
Yeah, that's been a big one.
It's a big one. I run lasers, how to use lasers in dentistry courses. That's a live course. Angie Wallace out of Oklahoma flies to Connecticut. You know Angie?
Oh yeah, she's great.
So she's taught, coming up this October, she's flying to Connecticut for the 5th time. Wow. To teach a lasers in dentistry course. And the audience is primarily hygienists, but there are some dentists in the class, and she addresses the use for both perio laser use and dental laser use.
That's awesome.
So how do I keep up? I read articles, and I look at topics and what's trending, and I don't know if I do more than that. I talk to people in the profession, and I know that 3D cone beam scanning is around now, and that's in practice. Hygienists are doing Invisalign. I'm not sold on the Botox for hygienists, but that's just my opinion. Not for hygienists, I just think that Botox is questionable as a procedure in general.
Yeah, there's some articles out there about like TMJ and using it to treat dysfunction. I haven't, made up my mind yet.
Yeah,
but I know that the dentists that are using it just swear by it, their clinical experience. they
If,
swear by
if,
it.
if it's being treated by the right person with the right skill sets to cure or remedy TMJ, headaches, fibromyalgia, things like that, I'm supportive of that. To remove a wrinkle,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel that it could it's cumulative, and it leads to certain muscular paralysis. I live in Boca Raton. I know what it looks like.
You see it quite a bit.
Yeah, they smile like this because their muscles are frozen.
Oh, funny. All right, we'll probably wrap up with one last question.
Okay.
So this question is, in your experience, what are some of the most pressing challenges faced by hygienists today?
I think, well, there's what comes to mind is time management. Trying to do your job, which takes, if you were to add up, if you ever did an exercise and you wrote down all the procedures you do from greeting the patient at the front door and exiting them to the desk, and you calculated how much time you needed to do all the things you're supposed to do, including the dentist coming in and checking, that's an hour and 20 minutes. But you have an hour. So you're always running
Some
behind.
offices give like 40 minutes.
But you have to do an hour and 20 minutes worth of work.
Yeah.
So what happens? Either you run a half hour behind all day long, which stress levels are off the chart. Patients are angry. The office is angry. There's a lot of, frustration. And so there's a lot to do, and you don't have some offices do have dental assistants that are dedicated to hygiene. There is VoiceWorks where you can use like Florida Probe, you can do Perio charting headsets. So that saves on, Perio charting. But I understand that a lot of hygienists, because of necessity, are, and I know from my own experience from the office that I go to get my teeth cleaned. Now, they know me very well, but that's no excuse not to go over my medical history, spot probe me. They don't take blood pressure. They give me a goodie bag, no oral hygiene instruction at all. I even ask them, how's my mouth? They're like, oh, good. But, they don't have time to do any patient education. So the really important things, the head and neck cancer screening, they take my tongue, look, and that's done. So what happens? We're deleting some of the most critical parts of our job, services to our patients, because we can't find the time. Now, shoot me for saying this, but I would rather leave a piece of calculus than to skip an oral cancer screening or take a blood pressure. And with the automated blood pressure cuffs, it takes seconds. But then you also have to add, information into the computer. So that's time consuming. It gets faster, but people coming back in, it's slower to use. Taking x-rays is faster with DEXIS. But generally, you're doing an hour and 20 minutes worth of work in 40 to 45 minutes to an hour. And then, of course, you can't control the doctor coming in or out. And then
depending on the doctor you work for, some of them don't mind just popping in wherever you're at, and some of them are like, nope, I want them all the way at the end, polished, everything is done, then I'll come in, and then you end up waiting. Where I prefer to work with a dentist who will just pop in whenever,
Well, and then if they pop in at the beginning, they'll do the dental exam, and they'll say, when you take your bite wings, get an image of number 14 or something. That's different than at the end of the appointment. They're like, oh, I need this done. So now you're already, and the next patient lets you have it for being late.
Right.
So It's very stressful. I did it for decades, and I know my heart goes out to hygienists that have to work under a lot of extreme pressure all day long and don't
Yeah.
get the support they need, don't get the proper instruments that they need. They ask for new instruments and they're like, you met your quota of 3 instruments for the year. So
Mhm.
if you're working with poor equipment, so if you ask me what are some of the things, there's a lot of things. I
Mhm.
wouldn't want to be anything else but a hygienist. So, but I just know that there's some downsides to it.
Yeah, and I just feel like we need to be advocating, like when we talk about mentorship, some of that should be how do we teach hygienists to advocate for themselves? How do we teach them to be assertive in the workplace and um, really advocate for those things that increase the amount of pressure, so that way the
Right.
workplace is more peaceful or more suitable to being successful, right? You can't be successful. I feel like they're setting us up for failure because
Not
of all of,
intentionally, but yes, nevertheless.
yeah. And so that is sort of my whole goal of this podcast is how do we get hygienists to be assertive for themselves, to really advocate for workplace well-being. So
Ergonomics, that's another
yeah.
thing.
Hmm.
We could go on
we
forever.
yeah, we could go on forever. Yeah, that's one of the actually in my ethics course, that's one of the dilemmas that we do. You had mentioned the poor instruments. So one of the dilemmas is, okay, you knew the instruments were in rough shape, you continued to use them, they didn't get replaced. Now the patient aspirated a broken tip. How do you handle it? Because yeah, I mean, really, all of these things exist around us in our workplace, and we sort of just deal with them. But what happens when things go bad, and how do you handle that? But,
Yes.
yeah.
It's complicated, and there's a lot that hygienists. Another thing that hygienists don't have time to do is sharpen.
Hmm.
So they're working with dull instruments, and so the risk of injury or to themselves and to others is high.
Yeah. Yep.
But
All of the things. Again, that could be a whole new podcast episode, right? All of the
yeah,
things that we face.
but
Well, I
I
want to thank you.
appreciate this opportunity
Yes.
to share my views and my story,
Yes.
my journey.
Yes, I love it. Thank you so much for coming on. And maybe this will maybe bleed into another episode and we'll come up with some other ideas that we can chat about. But it was
Okay,
a joy to chat with you.
same here,
And
Katie.
yeah, and we will see you guys next time. Thanks for listening. We'll come out with a new episode next Friday. And you can find us on Spotify and YouTube. So thanks for listening.